evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of We Hold These Truths. Little wiped out today. I've been working unbiblically 7 days in a row, but let me share this video real quick. But we got a pretty amazing story that we want to focus on, because what a lot of people don't realize is it's not only children that are targeted and victimized by state agencies posing as assistants, but it's also the elderly, and it's also the disabled. And this is something that, as I've been doing research, is really horrifying, because it's showing me that every stage of human life, if you become disabled, if something occurs in your life where somebody can swoop in with a court order and declare you incompetent, you lose your life. And tonight we're going to have with us Terry LaPoint, formerly of Medical Kidnap. Now she has her own site called Real News Spark, and has been making the transition kind of slow. We're going to share a little bit about that. I don't see if she's on the screen yet, so let's go ahead and bring Terry on, Ted. There she is. Terry, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right, it's good to have you on. And so tell everybody a little about yourself. I met you many years ago when you first, I believe it was when you first started your journalism and started approaching the phenomenon of medical kidnapping that was happening all over this country. And then our paths kind of intersected, and you covered our case and many others that we were involved with, and really worked diligently to expose this state-sponsored child trafficking. What got you into that, and where are you at now in your journalistic pursuits? What's been going on with Terry?
Okay. When I started writing, it was kind of as trying to just make a little side income. As a writer, I'd always wanted to write, and I love research. I want to find out answers. And I was a homeschool mom. And I saw Justina Pelletier's case in Boston, which alarmed me. I thought it was an anomaly. And you've probably heard me say this before. I thought it was an anomaly. I thought, okay, something's really wonky with the system. How could this happen? How could this even happen in America? And as I started kind of just researching and looking into that a little bit more, I was approached by Health Impact News. They were going to start the medical kidnap division and asked me if I would be interested in investigating these stories. I didn't come in this with an agenda. I didn't come in this with any idea that there were more than a few scattered random cases where the system wasn't working like it was supposed to, because I believed at the time that if Child Protective Services was involved, then, oh my gosh, those were horrible parents who were doing horrible things to their children. They were abusive and scum of the earth kind of people. I really believed that. And as I started investigating, I was with them for over 4 years, investigating hundreds and hundreds of stories. And I found out that I was completely wrong, that there were many wonderful parents like you and Amelia, loving, wonderful parents who were caught in the system and targeted and children taken from innocent parents. And then I realized there's disabled and the elderly as well. Just right after Christmas was when I left Health Impact News Medical Kidnap, and I needed to just take a step back from everything. And I haven't really gone on air and explained this to anybody, to people yet. But I just really needed to take some time back and to step back. It was so intense. I was worried about my health because I was having these chest pinches, really not really chest pains, but it was getting to be where it was almost constant. And I was scared because heart disease runs rampant in my family. And so I would, that's what killed my grandmother, the one that raised me, and just a lot of stuff in that. So I was really scared. And I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted. I was losing perspective. I needed to step back. And I actually spent a lot of time in prayer, and I told the Lord, I'll lay all of this down. I can go back. I can wait tables if you want me to. I just, whatever. And I sought the Lord, and I prayed and prayed and prayed. And I felt like he said, no, this is a fight that he has called me to. And so he gave me the idea for Real News Spark, real news that sparks people to make a difference, which is kind of what you guys do and so many people do, and what Medical Kidnap is always doing. It really does inspire people to take action and get involved. So that was I launched that, and meanwhile I've been getting dealing with the health stuff and getting all kinds of tests. I started in February getting all kinds of different tests, and they didn't end until just about 2 weeks ago, to find out what is going on. And you know what? My heart is fine. Even had the heart catheter, my heart is actually fine, thank God. But what I've got is sleep apnea. I've got severe sleep apnea, which was, and I've had it apparently for a while, and it just had built up. So with the exhaustion and the work schedule that I was keeping before, and I had been disobedient to the Lord in not taking time off and not taking a Sabbath occasionally, resting. So that is one thing that I'm changing, is I am taking a day off every week.
That's good. Not to interrupt you, I want to roll back on that a little, because there's a lot of people and with the issue we're about to talk to, I think it's an issue that is covered up as child trafficking in DCF was when we first got engaged in activism. It was hard to find a lot of information about. Now we have this explosion of activists, explosion of people that are aware of what's going on, but people need to understand that it's critical to take care of yourself. And when you're dealing with this evil on a day-to-day basis, and Terry, I think I'm getting a little more feedback still on your speakers, or is that you, Ted? Can you hear that, Ted?
I can. Yeah, I think that's Terry's microphone feeding back through. If you could turn that down a little bit, Terry, or if you have an earbud that you could discreetly put in your ears or one ear.
Put in earbuds, Terry,
yeah, if you'll kind of pause me, or fade me out for just a minute, I'll go and
fade her out, Ted, and I'll finish.
Fade me out. I'll go in the other room and get my earbuds.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, hold on.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And so, back to what I was saying, it's critical that while you're being barraged with this evil, while you're being barraged with the stories and the cries for help, that you take a moment to take care of yourself and take care of your own family. When we got our children back, there was almost a guilt in our life that, we were so active in activism and traveling and helping other people. And then our responsibilities changed, and it was a lot harder to get out there and do those things. And almost for a year, we've been taking a break. We just now started doing these shows again because, like Terry, as we took a step back and got to grow again with our family, as we're still continuing to grow and heal, the stories keep piling up, and we keep finding more and more complexity to this diverse issue of state agencies trafficking human beings. And so while Terry's getting ready, I want to touch upon an article here.
Ready.
Oh, wait, baby ready. And I'm still going to touch upon the article here. I want to read something, and this is a little different from the story that we're about to talk about with Terry that she just covered. But give me just a second here. Where was that? There it is. Okay. So I got this article. It's on nextavenue.org, and it's called Guardianship in the U.S. Protection or Exploitation. Doesn't that sound familiar? A lot of these people utilize assistance to gather information on people and target people. But it's a story, and I want to read to you this story really quick. It says, Ginger Franklin was just shy of her 50th birthday when she fell down the stairs of her Nashville area townhouse in 2008. This is a 2016 article, but this is an older story. A marketing representative for Sam's Club, she was taken to the hospital with a severe brain injury. Doctors weren't sure if she would survive. Since she had not designated anyone to make decisions for her, they determined she was incapacitated, and her aunt petitioned the court to get her a guardian. And this is, families, if you're watching this, don't trust the state. You can't just trust the state that they're going to do what's right with your loved ones. You got to do some research and see what's going on in your county and in your state with elderly people. So
50 isn't elderly.
Huh?
I said 50 isn't elderly.
Huh? or disabled.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting close to 52, so I don't want to think I'm that. I got a little bit of gray, but no, but she was incapacitated, or if you have an elderly grandma or a spouse that has a disability and you're having caretaking issues, they thought, look, there's these state programs. We can get assistance. Maybe we can get a caregiver. And I'll cut to the chase down in this story. So basically what happened is she recovered in care. And this was the result when she recovered. When she returned home from a rehabilitation center 7 weeks later, however, the guardian told her that she didn't have a home anymore and her townhome was empty. They'd actually liquidated her property and estate to pay for her care, and she had to return to that nursing home, and to pay for her way to stay there, she had to cook, she had to clean, she was reduced to a maid service. They didn't even pay her, and they charged her an $850 a month rent plus $200 an hour attorney fees whenever she had to do anything. And this is just one story of how the state and this guardianship and this family court and these adult protective services can come in and strip people's rights and take advantage of a circumstance. And so you recently wrote a story, Terry, about a retired Alabama school teacher. Kind of start us out. What did you learn? What happened? How did you hear about this story?
Her daughter contacted me, Nancy Scott, and Nancy has been her mother's power of attorney over a course of 30 years of documents. Her mother always named her as the who she wanted to be the power of attorney to make any decisions if she ever became incapacitated. So her mother was very elderly, but she didn't have any kind of diagnosis of any kind of terminal illness or anything like that, even though she was very elderly and well into her 90s, was making her own decisions. She would go to a assisted living facility or retirement home, and there would be some issues or something that she would decide, you know what, I want to go somewhere else. And she would go, and her daughter would help her in doing that, but she was calling the shots. She was very much an in-charge person. So at one point they ended up in Tennessee, and they wanted to come back to South Alabama. They're from South Alabama, 4 hours south of Birmingham. And so they had been in the Nashville, Tennessee area, and she had been in a nursing home because after falling, she had fallen and broken her hip, and they was supposed to go there for recovery, and she wanted out of there, and they wanted to come south, come closer to home. And her daughter took her to the hospital to get her evaluated to make sure that she was be okay to make the trip. And the hospital said, yeah, she's fine to go on this trip. They go on this trip. They stop in Birmingham at a hotel. The next morning, her mother's running a fever. So they decide to go to St. Vincent's Hospital here in Birmingham and check it out, see what's going on with this fever. Turns out the mother has a urinary tract infection and some mild flu symptoms. Well, urinary tract infection, and I did not know this, but a urinary tract infection in an elderly person causes confusion and symptoms of dementia. Did you know that?
I did not know this.
And I found PubMed research. I mean, and I talked with somebody who's a nurse, and she said, "Oh yeah, this is well known. They know that for some reason among the elderly, a urinary tract infection mimics dementia or Alzheimer's." So it looked like she had dementia, but she didn't. She had a urinary tract infection. And over the course of her stay at that hospital, which should have just been a few days, things went wonky, and there was some bad communication from Tennessee where somebody had written into the reports that came down to Alabama saying that she had end-stage Alzheimer's disease. Well, she didn't have end-stage Alzheimer's. Okay. In 2016 is not that long ago, she had been at Emory University, which is in Georgia, and had a full battery of the tests and stuff. And they said the neurologist and a psychologist, a couple of doctors said she does not have any symptoms of Alzheimer's. She's fine. 2016. So the only diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's was written in this report that from that nursing home in Tennessee and that got to the hospital that somehow reached St. Vincent's Hospital. And I'll get back to that because this was not an actual diagnosis. She wasn't diagnosed with that by anybody qualified to do so. The hospital here in Birmingham decided to petition. There was a social worker that petitioned a court in Birmingham, Jefferson County, that said, we want you to overturn or take away the power of attorney, and we want you to turn that over to us. And they put her in a guardianship. And then they declared that she needed hospice care. They forced her onto hospice and put her in a nursing home where she's been ever since. And after a couple of months of visits, of allowing some visits from her daughter, they cut off all visits from her daughter. So her daughter went for 10 months without being able to see her at all. She's locked away 4 hours away from where her life has been. There's nobody really around here that was from her that was around. And so she's locked away and she has deteriorated greatly since she's been here. It's crazy.
And so when you say they, so let me try to wrap this together. So here you have a elderly woman. She's traveling. She has urinary tract infection, mimics the symptoms of Alzheimer's. So they force her in this hospital. Who initiated the guardianship? Who pushed that issue? Was it DCF? Was it family?
Yeah. DCF in Alabama, it's known as DHR, Department of Human Resources, which is over Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services.
And
so
how did they get involved in the situation? That's
unclear. It appears that somebody from the hospital got them involved. It could be that hospital in Tennessee contacted the nursing home that she's in now. I've learned since the article came out, Diversicare of River Chase, that chain is owned by people in Tennessee. It's not an Alabama thing. That chain is owned from Tennessee. So what happened, there are documents, and I've got them here, where this woman named Lisa Fuller signed a document that originated at the nursing home in Tennessee that was sent to the hospital kind of through the ambulance company and then at the hospital. Lisa Fuller signed representing the nursing home, and then there's her signature again as an RN as the emergency department nurse at the hospital.
Oh, wait a minute. So you're saying this document that followed this elderly woman was signed by the same individual, one saying they were part of the nursing home, and the other she's saying she's part of the emergency department. Is that what
that is exactly what I'm saying.
So it appears to be some kind of fraud, or at least maybe this is something they're familiar with doing to manipulate the legal process to get guardianship on people. Why do you think this specific individual was targeted? Or do you know?
There's still a lot of questions. I don't know if you can see that signature. You see that, Lisa Fuller? Right. That's the emergency department, ED department. Okay. See that signature? Lisa Fuller? That's from, this document is from the nursing home. Same signature. I mean, you compare the writing.
What's the distance between the hospital and the nursing home?
A few miles.
Okay.
A few miles.
It's that she works at both places, and maybe this is what she does.
Well, when the daughter found out about what was going on, she Googled the name of this Lisa Fuller, and she saw an image that came up on Google, and it's this woman. This is Lisa Fuller. She's at the time had been indicted for fraud with Tennessee's Medicare. So and
as an RN, was she a healthcare provider?
We don't. Hang on. Just hold that thought. Okay. So this woman the daughter recognized. She said, "I've seen her in scrubs at the nursing home, standing outside of outside of her mother's room at the nursing home." She remembered seeing her numerous times. She noticed that she really didn't smile, and she seemed a bit cold and distant. So she noticed her, and so she starts asking the people at the nursing home about this Lisa Fuller. They don't know who she is. That she asked, she said, named at least four different people that are staff and supervisors and all that at the nursing home, including the nursing home's social worker. None of them had ever heard of her. So she called, the daughter again, called the hospital. Nobody at the hospital had ever heard of her. She called the ambulance transport company, because there's some notes that she wrote on another document where these are things that this woman has said that ended up on that report. So reports from 3 different places that came from her. None of these 3 places has ever heard of her.
That is pretty incredible. Now, is there a chance that there are people within those facilities may know this woman's fraud or know who she is, and they're just using a fraudulent name, that it was somebody else just using this name of a known person to commit fraud just to push this process?
That's a good question. That's a good question, and that's an unanswered question. I think that would be a possibility.
So what did these documents do? Were they legal documents? Were they documents that got her put into the guardian?
Yeah, there are things that say that she had this one from the nursing home. It originates, it says, and I've got it highlighted, why does the patient meet medical necessity? End stage Alzheimer's disease.
Oh, wow. So
that's where that diagnosis came from, on this document that she signed.
So Lisa Fuller is on these documents, both at the hospital and the nursing home. Nobody knows who this individual is, but they're utilizing this documentation
to say that, okay, this woman is at the end of her life, and she's got Alzheimer's, and the daughter's just moving her hither and yon, and there's some in here that kind of alleges that the daughter is kind of crazy. Well, the daughter's not crazy. I've met with her many times. She's actually not crazy, and she's actually got she has gone to a psychologist because of the craziness in her life, and I've got documented reports from a psychologist that says she is not crazy. So she's not crazy.
That's relative, because both you and I have seen in this system, and this is where it's hard for people to wrap their mind around. This fraud is so big, and like she said, here we have a person that's committing Medicare fraud. That's happening all over the place with these people. They're misdiagnosing children, disabled people. They're doing medical research. There's so many industries that are profiting off of this system. It's almost like they look for people to commoditize. That's an avenue for them to get a hold of some Title IV funding, and they'll run over any person, destroy any life in order to get that money. And then I think some people just do it because they have some kind of psychopathic agenda of power tripping on people. But there's definitely a fraud that's a lot larger than just an agency going on with all of these things. And so, so as of now, nobody knows who this individual is.
Right. And I really hope that there's enough evidence here to prompt people like police,
like maybe the police
or the Department of Justice, to investigate, find out what exactly is going on, because this is crazy. In all the research that I've ever done, I hadn't seen before. I've seen plenty of altered documents. I will tell you that. I've seen tons of medical documents that are altered, that the parents will get a medical document from the hospital, and then they'll go back and get another report, or it'll be maybe their lawyer gets it or something, and they're the same date or whatever, and they're supposed to be the same document, and they're altered, which is technically illegal, but I've not seen people being prosecuted over it. But I've seen that happen plenty of times. Sure. And I wouldn't have believed it had I not seen it, but I've seen it too many times.
And that's why these kind of shows are important, because people need to be educated that this is really happening. And the sad thing is if you, as a citizen of the United States of America, ignore And I say this all the time, but if you ignore the injustices being committed against your neighbor in a just universe, that God is going to bring that back your direction. When we turn a blind eye to the suffering, to the poor, to the oppressed, when we allow the wicked their reign, they just get worse and worse and worse until they devour everybody, which is why it's so important to educate yourself on this, because it could happen to your grandma. It could happen to, you know,
to your spouse even. I remember doing the Taylors, Helen Taylor and her husband, where they took her husband from her. You remember that? They took her husband. She's like, she didn't have her car, but she had the capability of taking care of it. She couldn't lift him to change him or whatever. She needed some physical help, but that could have been done.
Didn't they lock her up, trying to say she was crazy because she was fighting
for her own husband to get him home. Yeah. Now she did actually get him back eventually, but I don't know if that would have ever happened had she not gotten public attention. And that is the thing. That's why your show and all the other shows, all the other media, all of it is so important, and the social media and the Facebook posts, because all of this helps to draw attention to it. This is the reason our founding fathers put freedom of the press in the Constitution, because our job is to hold government accountable to we the people. And if we don't report this stuff, I mean, mainstream media has all but abdicated this role. But I mean, they still do it a little bit, but not like the alternative media. So it is your show and so many other media, Medical Kidnap, and all the other ones that do this are so important.
Absolutely. And so back to that story a little bit. So the individual's in the hospital. They've been put into a guardianship. Let's get a little more detail in that. What is a guardianship, and what rights does this person have?
When they put somebody in a guardianship, they've got a court-appointed guardian who is often a stranger, a complete stranger to this person, doesn't know anything about them, and that person now has the right to make their financial decisions, to make their medical decisions, to make their living arrangement decisions, to make decisions as who can or cannot see the person that's under their care, to make all these decisions for them. In short, they become their warden, shall we say. They rule their lives. It's like they own them. And these people, once they're under a guardianship, they really, I haven't seen where they have any rights left, even though they haven't committed any crime.
And what kind of court does this happen in? Is it a family court, like with what happens with children, or is it a different type of court?
I know in Alabama and some other states, it's a probate court.
Okay. So again, it's
a non-criminal court, right?
Where people don't have the rights you would have if it was a criminal. And that's
exactly.
It's strange to me, because I understand, after seeing all this fraud, why whoever developed it, because it allows them to do whatever in somebody's life. And because it's not a criminal charge, they try to claim that the Constitution doesn't apply, but they have these courts have tremendous power. And if the Constitution, I mean, we call this show We Hold These Truths, and in that statement in the Declaration of Independence, it says that we have rights endowed by our Creator to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in the process of due process, people can't even be deprived of their liberty without due process, yet they're not giving people this due process. Then you have these guardians that you said are more like wardens. And I wanted to read just a few things from that other story. It was other abuses, and tell me if you've heard any other stories like these. So just a handful of other stories that happened in different states. So in Phoenix, this woman, Marie Long, she had amassed over $1.3 million in savings. She had a stroke, and 4 years later, she was almost completely broke. The Guardian completely built her account and was even charging, because the Guardian charges for their service. She was charging this lady $50 per hour for an individual to open her mail. I mean, that's complete fraud. Daniel Goss of Long Island, he was hospitalized with cellulitis, The children started fighting, and so they appointed, apparently that cellulitis led to him having some kind of disability. And so he got a guardian. They landed him in a locked ward with a violent roommate where he was assaulted repeatedly. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on. There's about 10 stories here where a guardian just comes in and they pretty much can do anything to this person's life. And who oversees these guardians? If someone was going to make a complaint, or like for this person that's, what is the name of the teacher again? Let me go back to there.
Marion Leonard. Or
Leonard.
she was Miss Gregory when she was teaching school. Her students know her as Miss Gregory.
Okay, so Miss Gregory, Marion Leonard, what is her recourse right now? How 10 months she's been unlawfully detained under a false guardianship. What is
Actually, it's been longer than that. She can't do anything. There's not really. Okay, you ask who are these people accountable to? The same people that the Child Protective Services and family courts are accountable to. In other words, themselves. They police themselves. In other words, there is no accountability. It's the foxes guarding the hen house.
And what's pretty amazing is when I was doing research for this show, because this is an area we touch upon a lot, but I think it's important. We're going to get to your second story because it ties into these state-sponsored traffickers going after any type of vulnerable person. But I think it's important for people to try to find resources on this, but I couldn't find articles. I would try to Google kidnapped elderly people, forced guardianship. And I don't know if Google algorithms are protecting this fraud because they seem to have their hands in all sort of crookedness, but are there other people reporting on this or other agencies that have oversight? Where can people get information about more cases? Or is this something that really needs people to start paying attention and writing more stories? Because I really couldn't find a whole lot.
We need to get more attention on it. There is a Facebook group that Nancy Scott brought to my attention called Murdered by Hospice. Oh, wow. And so apparently this is huge. And I remember several months ago finding that there are 3 times as many adults in guardianships as there are children in foster care. 3 times as many.
And the sad thing, Terry, about that is like, and I just want to remind anyone that's watching right now, this is a call-in show. The number, that's my wife trying to cook some yummy barbecue. Hi, Amelia. Okay. This is a call-in show. The number there on the top, if anybody wants to call in, if you have a question for Terry, if you have your own story of this type of abuse or DCF through a spouse or a parent or anyone, go ahead and call in. We'll take your call. But so I lost my train of thought.
Okay. Well, you wanted to address something that you kind of alluded to is the money and their estate. Lisa Belanger out of Boston dealt with several cases. She's an attorney, and she dealt with several cases in the Boston area where they essentially euthanized some senior citizens. But her own father had been taken by the system, and he had a sizable estate. He was an attorney, and he thought like Miss Gregory thought that he had his affairs in order, had all the documents in place and all of that. He had about $9 million in his estate when they kicked his daughter and her family out of his home, the house that she grew up in. They kicked them out, and the guardians took over, and they built his estate and charged for opening emails and all kinds of stuff. I mean, crazy fees like you were talking about. And I think it was down to $1.5 million that was left after just a few years. And then he passed away. And his daughter only got to see him in the last couple of months before he passed away. They kept him away for a couple of years.
Really got to pay attention in their own communities to what's going on, and if there's stories like these, because it impacts all of us. We have to start getting back into that American idea that power corrupts. The founding fathers did not believe that human beings could be trusted with unchecked power. That's why they created the system of government that we have. And these people have unchecked power. Now, in this kind of proceeding, have you seen the same kind of secrecy? Do they seal these cases or gag families? Have you seen that?
I have seen that. I've seen bullying. I've seen attorneys that fight for them being, well, Lisa Belanger, they tried to take away her bar license because she was fighting for her father. There's a lot of the same kinds of thing. It's two sides of the same coin.
And I tried to find this other story, Terry, that I heard about. Maybe you heard about it, which just blew my mind. I searched for hours trying to find more information, and it's just not there. But I even tried to find this story. This lady was an attorney, and they forced her mom into some kind of nursing home that was subpar. She wasn't getting fed right. Every time the daughter came to visit her, she'd have wounds or injuries. We've seen all of, that's one thing I've seen that they'll do is they'll take these family members, they'll put them into subpar care where they're being abused, but they'll charge them like they're living in the Hilton. And so she went to the nursing home one day and took her mom out for a walk, and they charged her with kidnapping, and she lost her license. Did you hear about that case?
No, I did not hear about that at all. That's horrible. And just the retaliation. You talk about the wounds. There was this one lady this Ms. Leonard is where I can drive there. And I went to see her in the beginning of May. Yeah, beginning of May. And she had a bed sore on her foot. I took a picture of it. 6 weeks later on June 17th, I went and saw her again. And let's see, that's the picture. And she had that same sore on her foot. It seemed to be even worse. And the wound nurse had come in that same day. I think I checked this after she left. She kind of gave her a cursory glance. She told us as she was going out the door, she was the wound nurse. She said, "There's no wounds on her." The same day. Yes, the same day I took that photograph. The same day I took
kind of like deceitfulness and not.
Lying is what we call it. There's a word for it. It's lying.
Right. No, they lie. But when you go into the system with the child protection side of things, it's like these people have a problem with reality, and they're so used to being dishonest. Like in our hearings, they got busted lying so much because it's like even when they were being watched, they were incapable of telling the truth. Like they were so used to this life of deceit. And fortunately, I've seen some articles even today that courts are actually starting to hold people accountable in various states where people, caseworkers are getting arrested for falsifying records. But I don't know if you saw our last alert, but we have a guardian ad litem here who even got busted, which guardian ad litem is a similar type of thing to the guardianship, lying on the stand about visiting these children and things that were being said about the children not wanting to go home, and she never even made the visits. The cops busted her and the state busted her, and they buried her discipline, and she's still working as an attorney ad litem even though the court caught her lying. And even just recently,
sometimes they reward them. Sometimes they promote these people when they get caught
because it's bigger. And I think people need to understand that these people in positions of power in our country today that has abandoned God and forgotten the idea that we are created with rights. We did evolve with rights. We were created with rights, and they have that lack of fear of God. They're just using their positions of power to commoditize us. It's a new type of slavery where they're going to and fee and capture and utilize, weaponize the legal system to come after people. And because they've perfected this art, we don't have the level of people standing up that we need. And they're doing it with disabled people as well. But before we go there, is there anything else you want to share about the story? What's the disposition now? How is she doing? And what are the next steps?
Well, amazingly, the very next day after the article came out, one of the family friends went to visit, and they were whereas before we could just walk into the nursing home and sign in, they were asking all kinds of questions. She said that funky smell, the nursing home smell, was gone, and they were scrubbing the place from top to bottom. She said her room was covered up with nurses and supervisors and directors of this and all this kind of stuff. And they were, I mean, they were jumping and hopping too, making sure that she was getting better, and the wound on her foot was significantly better. And I thought, oh my gosh,
Well,
if you have medicine that can make it significantly better in one day after getting exposed, why didn't you do it 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, when you let this poor lady suffer? Anyway,
and a lot of people would rejoice and be like, see, she's getting better care. But remember, everybody,
it's only because we called her out, and we called them out.
But she's been kidnapped on top of that. So it doesn't matter what kind of care I mean,
right.
It's fortunate that she's there, because in a lot of these cases, that family member would have shown up and been met by police, and they'll do the same thing they do in these child custody cases. They'll say, well, we don't think it's in the best interest of this individual to have you come in there anymore. So it's good that your story had impact. And did I read somewhere that maybe some attorneys were getting involved?
Yes, Life Legal Defense Foundation has come in, and they're looking for what they can do. These are the guys that were involved with the Terry Schiavo case, if you remember that case.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, this is a big deal, very big deal,
Well,
very big deal. So I pray that this poor lady will be able to live out her final years, months, however long she's got left, that she'll be able to live it out in peace with her family and be taken care of. Just simply having people coming and monitoring kind of even helps to hold people accountable. So, and I do want to say this, if you've got a person in the nursing home, even if they're not under a guardianship care, check on them periodically. Please go and check on them, because if nobody's coming and checking on that person, they're going to be they're the easy one to ignore. It's the greasy wheel or the squeaky wheel that gets the grease kind of thing. Hold them accountable.
And if you suspect something, fortunately, we live in an age where there's a lot of amazing ways to get evidence. And there's nanny cams, there's gifts that you can disguise as a camera, because there has been quite a few cases in recent history where people are getting caught abusing elderly people in these institutions. And I'm telling you, for you people that want government-run healthcare from a veteran that thinks that's insane because he's been subjected to government-run healthcare, these places they put these seniors, once they take control of their life, are awful. A lot of times they're infested with bugs. Sometimes if they believe the patient's being combative, they'll strap them down if they try to escape. It's like a weird prison. And
they drug them. They've done with this. Yeah, they drug them to just make them where they're not combative anymore.
It's just insane. And we need to pay attention to this as we fight for all the vulnerable. And yes. So the next story you said you wanted to touch upon was a story about a special needs boy that DCF took custody of. Why don't you tell us about that? What's that?
Okay.
Story?
Nathan Zeller is a 13-year-old boy in North Carolina, in literally Mayberry, the town where they have Mayberry. That was filmed in his town. I mean, literally, I went there and
Mayberry no more. According to this story, it sounds like
right.
Motel.
So this child had a medical condition from the get-go that was diagnosed many years later, that he had a narrowing of his intestines. So when he would nurse, when he would they would feed him formula, he would upchuck, he would regurgitate, and that was at the very beginning, but they didn't find out about what was actually going on for many years. There was never the testing to do to see about it. He ended up with an infection that he got in the NICU, and ended up being diagnosed with cerebral palsy and becoming a quadriplegic. Oh, wow. So he wasn't born that way. He literally wasn't born that way. It's just things happen. And so his mother is taking good care of him. His family is loves him very much. He was involved in, he attended school. He had this child, for a special needs child, had everything that he could possibly want. They really went above and beyond, making sure that this special need child was included in life and society and the community. This child was very well loved by the community, and the mother kept on fighting for answers. She was looking for answers when they would tell her things that didn't make sense about feeding him through his feeding tubes and stuff. And there were things that weren't making sense. It's a really complicated case. I've got a huge thick file of the medical stuff to try to figure out exactly what was going on. But I looked at it. There were signs that were missed.
And the mom's questioning this to the doctor.
The mom's questioning this. She's trying to find out. And so she takes him to a specialist and gets a second opinion somewhere else. And eventually she's on the way to getting some real answers. They finally got some diagnosis, but not from the hospital that was the local one. And so they finally found out what was going on. And this could have been fixed. But rather than make the hospital that was the local one look bad, there were allegations, and Child Protective Services was called in, very possibly to cover up the fact that they missed something that they should have figured out a long, long time ago.
I don't covering up their own negligence, but what was the nature of the allegations? Was it Munchausen or
Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which
I always have trouble pronouncing.
Munch, like you're munching. They're munching on these people. You're munching on them and chewing them up and spitting them out.
And that's what they do. And this is a common diagnosis I have seen that these hospitals and DCF workers utilize. If they can't find anything else on the parent, if the parent's not a drug addict or have some kind of weird background, they will find some discrepancy in the medical care to say you're faking your child's illness or causing. Not saying this doesn't actually happen.
It does, but it's extremely rare. It's very, very rare. It's a really crazy mental condition. But a parent with a special needs child, especially a medically complex child, and they're trying to find answers, and this doctor's not giving them the answers, or this doctor's not looking, or this doctor's not all that kind of stuff, and they're going and they're trying to find more answers. That parent can easily be labeled as Munchausen because they're a troublemaker parent. They don't make life easy for the hospital. Or the other thing that I've seen it used for is medical malpractice. If there is actual something that the hospital has done and they're going, we're going to cover this up, we're going to just whisk this child away and get mom and dad out of the way so they can't sue us. So,
and if they make any allegations, we'll say, they've been accused of child abuse. Don't listen to them. They're discredited as people. And I have seen that. This has been parents that are fairly, aggressive, not in a bad way, but wanting answers, wanting a good quality of life for their children.
Right.
And then these doctors retaliate. So you have this hospital, they missed a bunch of stuff. There's negligence. And now they call CPS on the parents. What happened?
Right. And so this mother has been a dental office supervisor for 20 years, same dental office. She works with a dental anesthesiologist. This gentleman, this dentist, knows the case. He's seen the case, and I've got an affidavit signed by him backing her up every which way. And I've got lots of reports that are backing this mother up. And I've met her and I've seen what she's provided this child with, but they took him away and have her only with visitation. They charged her with Munchausen, and he was in this one hospital for a year and a half, and they finally got him out into this other facility. This other facility they're trying. It seems like they're really trying to work with him. It's not that they're bad people. They're good. They seem to be good people, but their hands are tied because of the things that the hospital says. So the mother just has periodic visitation. She has no voice in what's going on. The thing is, with this case and with this elderly woman, in both of these cases, before the state stepped in, their loved one was doing somewhat okay. They had still had some kind of quality of life. After the state took over, they've destroyed these people. So really and truly, now both of these that are accused of, and had their family members taken away, there's ample evidence that they've done nothing wrong. So let me be very clear in that. However, if all these allegations were true and this mother and this daughter had been these horrible, crazy people, their loved one was not any worse off in their care than they are now. And in fact, they are in much worse shape now since they've been taken away than they were before.
Yeah, and I just remembered my lost thought earlier. And that's what I was saying. These people are talking about how they want this government-run healthcare, but it's not helping people. When we allow the government to take over our healthcare, take over our lives, begin to manage and do things, tax everything and take everything and offer services across the board, the spectrum has been that I have seen is fraud. Look at the VA, full of fraud, still full of fraud. Whistleblowers are retaliated against. It's not changing. People not getting the care that they deserve, so that these places are offering a service. And then when they're challenged about the treatment of somebody, they retaliate and utilize this secret court system. And I like you made that point in your article. You said, is it a crime to disagree with the doctor nowadays? And with this vaccination stuff that we got going on, like New York City, it seems to be that it's starting to become a crime if you don't listen to what these elite systems have to tell you what you have to do with your life.
And it's like we forget that how many people get wrong diagnoses and how many people die from medical care from wrong diagnoses or from medical mistakes. That's one of the top reasons for people to die. But we're putting them in charge and we're saying, oh, but if you disagree and challenge them, then you're bad. This makes no sense. This is completely illogical.
Right. And then they send all the force of the state against you. And because for whatever reason, people have been educated into the point where we just, well, if the government's involved, then you must have done something wrong. Or this idea of giving all of our power and our right, like our government is formed from the consent of the government. And in these secret courts, these family courts, somehow we got to get people in office and representatives to get engaged where we begin to change the laws in how these cases are dealt with. Because there's an enormous amount of fraud and suffering that's going on. And so what's going on in the end result of this case?
In the end result, there's nothing been really changed. They did criminally charge this mother. They kept on trying. They tried to get her to take a plea bargain, and she kept on refusing, which did nothing but make them mad. This case is still up in the air, and the last pictures I've seen of this little boy they're absolutely heartbreaking. I went to see him in the hospital in North Carolina before, and he's even worse off now. It is so sad. It's just, it's pitiful. His body is just becoming more and more deformed because of not getting up and not being loved. And I don't know, the place that's working with him now, where he is there, I believe they're trying. The mother believes that they are trying their best, but there are things that they cannot do because of the doctors and the social workers. So
they're not his mother. And they're not his mother, and they're not going to give that mother's love. And they've deprived him of something that even despite the suffering he's had for his whole life, they've deprived him of that.
And his big brother, I mean, the pictures of him and his big brother, Will, are just amazing. They're precious. This big brother absolutely adored his little brother and took him everywhere, did all kinds of stuff with him. And would go to ball games and the park and all of that. And now they can't. Now they can't at all. And so the human element, I think, is what is the most heartbreaking thing to me, because family was designed by God. Before the foundations of the earth, we had God the Father, God the Son. Family was designed by God. And we've taken it where the state is supposed to be in charge. The government can do a better job of taking care of your elderly people and taking care of your disabled people and taking care of your children. So you must submit, because it takes a village and all that, but it's the village of the government people. And I'm not anti-government, because
No.
like I love the Constitution. I love the principles that our country was founded upon, but those principles are being swept under the rug, ignored. Um, uh, just this is so much opportunity for fraud and for people to take advantage of these people, because there's so much money in it. Because if you take a senior citizen, you can take their estate, you can bilk it out of millions of dollars, or you can, if they're not rich, then you can charge Medicaid for all these you can medicate them to death and get tons of money from Medicaid until all that runs out. With the children, you can use them as medical lab rats, or you can you can get those huge adoption bonuses from the Adoption and Safe Families Act, and the foster care money that through that act, and all of that, the financial incentive that's there to destroy families. And if we could get rid of all that financial incentive and just let family take care of, equip families to take care of their own families. I'm sure there's going to be the crazy abusive people that there are abusive people in this world, but you know what? Child abuse is a crime, and you belong in prison. If you're beating the snot out of your kid and abusing them, that's a crime, and you belong in prison. And then
same with elderly abuse.
Exactly. It's a crime, and you belong in prison. And then but then what happens in normal families is somebody else in the family steps up, somebody in the community steps up. You raised me. I was raised by my grandparents. So, and there were reasons, and the state never got involved. And my grandmother was the most amazing person, and I thank God for her. But I had access to all my relatives always, because the state didn't come in and take me away.
Now, I don't know if you watched, and I don't know how many people know this, but I was in foster care, and
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and actually,
Wow.
well, let me give you something else shocking. The people that put me in foster care were the people that stole my children, and my children didn't even live there in that county, which is a common thing that we see. And I had a very hard life in the beginning because of the state is a poor parent. I mean, I was
Right.
back in foster care in Kansas at a time where they didn't have anywhere to put me. They put me in a juvenile psychiatric prison. I didn't even have a diagnosis. They just didn't have a foster home for me, where my roommate was in there because he had shot his sister 26 times and reloaded twice while he was doing it. And what kind of impact that has on a child that's never had that kind of issue, that's never been in trouble with the law, any of those things. It was very destructive. And so I knew when my kids were going through this, that I was not going to allow them to be destroyed by this system. And by God's grace, I've recovered from a lot of the trauma.
You're an overcomer. Yeah.
But it really frustrated me listening to the Democratic debates the other night. And not because, listen to me, I am a Christian. I am not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I heard someone say this the other day. I am for anyone that's for liberty and the Constitution, even if they're a Democrat. If they're fighting for the Constitution, I'm right behind them. If they're fighting against them, I'm right in front of them, fighting them. Okay. So this partisanship is not what I think this country needs. We need to come together and get the rule of law to be what's central again in our lives. But in that debate, when they're talking about the immigration crisis at the border, I heard multiple times candidates say it is a crime to tear families apart. It is a crime that children are just disappearing and being separated from their families. And I'm thinking, but that's happening here.
Right.
And what they're not talking about is the 2,400 missing migrant children that have just vanished, that are potentially being sex trafficked, or the 70% of sex trafficking victims coming out of foster
care.
They're not addressing they're skirting around the issue to use this as a club to beat people with, but they're not telling the whole story.
Right.
And
Well, and
people
they're
are
leaving
dipping
out the
into
part.
Social Security like it's their personal piggy bank
Yeah.
by defrauding the system and trafficking human beings.
Well, and they're leaving out the part too that has been some on the other side have addressed that some of these children are crossing the border multiple times with multiple sets of parents, so they're literally being trafficked. And some of these parents that they're separating them from aren't their parents, so they're already being trafficked. So that is a harsh reality, and it's a loophole that the traffickers and the coyotes have learned to exploit, and it's a giant loophole.
And the government and they're building private institutions that are housing these families and children. And people need to understand, if you're going to fight this issue, get into the whole issue. Get into the fact that your government is trafficking children, the disabled, and elderly. When I say your government, I don't mean the government as a whole. I'm not anti-government either, Terry. I'm anti-corruption.
Thank you. Yes, that's a perfect way to say it. Yes.
And I wish there were people in our government who we've given public trust to that would begin to hold these people accountable.
Right.
But, it's not going to happen until individually and in our communities and in our states, we get people educated to the point where we see a grandma kidnapped, we see a family being commoditized and abused and their children trafficked, that the community as a whole steps up and stops.
Right.
Stops the incentives, prosecutes the fraud, takes licenses away from people that are committing fraud, violating the oath that they took, violating their code of ethics. We need action. And that's why I really appreciate the work that you do, because I think that you have done a tremendous job at raising awareness, because when you come on and tell me a story, I know there's a whole bunch that you haven't even shared. And you pulling out the bomb.
I was just going to show you how much. Let's see. Well, I've dropped some of it.
You're a journalist, Terry, and people need to understand. Didn't you win an award from Michelle Malkin or something?
For Michelle Malkin. You see this stack? This is not even all of it on this last story. Okay, this is not even all of it. Okay.
Papers. The beast loves papers. Well, I really appreciate you. We're pressing up on our time limit. Ted, do we have any calls or any questions on the chat? Does anybody have any comments they want to make? Joseph Gibson said hi.
Hi, Joseph.
We love you. Please share our videos, and thank you for joining the fight. We know you're out there fighting for freedom and liberty as well. Ted, do we got anything?
The only person who called was Joseph. He wanted to say hi. He had you and he didn't feel like it, I guess, but
okay.
He just wanted to thank you both again for being on his show. So I guess go ahead and plug his show.
I don't know the name of his show right offhand. You put me on the spot, Ted. Joe Gibson, put it in the comments. Put a link to your show in the comments. We support Joseph Gibson's show. He's out there talking about the Constitution. He had me on during my hunger strike. Has a good audience base. Had Terry on. We really appreciate everyone, like she said. And I apologize. There's so many people that are doing grassroots stuff like We Hold This Truce and Real Spark News and or Real News Spark.
Real News Spark.
Oh my gosh, it's been a long week, guys. It's been a long week, but we need people to continue.
Here's the name of his show. It's Understanding the Times in Which We Live Today.
There you go. Joseph, please forgive me for not. Thanks, Ted. You're supposed to give me the information before you ask me the question. You're producing got me sideways today. But no, thank you. Yeah, please go to Joseph's show and support that as well. Terry,
support anybody that is exposing this and is working. There are advocates, and I know that there are advocates who don't get along. That's always going to happen. But anybody who is working to solve this problem, let's encourage them and show them appreciation. But we've got to pray. We've got to act. We can't do this without prayer, because this is spiritual warfare. It really is. And I interrupted you.
I understand that. I think that's a good place to close, because sometimes people think we start talking about Jesus and the Bible and people get offended. It's like, listen. There are a lot of, when you ask, why would people do this? That's the question always people ask. Why would they do this? Number one reason I've seen is money. I mean, money is the root of all evil.
The love of money. The love of money. Is.
Thank you for keeping me biblically honest, Terry. The love of money is the root of all evil. All evil. It is. It's at the root. But there's also political ideology. There's people in the government that have a more leftist, socialist ideology that believe you're property of the state. You're part of the collective, and your individual rights and desires really don't matter that much. What matters is the collective and what they want. So you have those people in the mix. And then you have people that are just demonic. And there are people that are demonically trying to create suffering on others and to destroy families. Because like what Terry said, the family is a unit created by God. When you look at the book of Genesis, it says the wife will leave her husband and the two will become one flesh. And he told Noah and everyone to populate the earth and to replenish it. And that we're made in the image of God. And that family was the structure where mom and dad were to train children in the next generation into the law of the Lord and the things of God. So it's essential that the enemy disrupt and destroy that God created structure. And if you don't understand that at the root of all this, it's demonic. It's demonic destruction. Then the solutions will not be complete, because this is not just something that will be solved politically. They'll find new ways to defraud if we're not paying attention, because liberty is something we have to be diligent to preserve.
Yes,
we have to look for encroachments upon those liberties and fight them. And so I'm off my soapbox. Terry, is there anything you want to share with anybody, or if people want to help with these cases or get more information, are there ways they can support either of these families or support your work?
If you send a message to Real News Spark, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. If you contact me that way, neither one of these families has a Facebook page. A lot of times families will have a Facebook page or some kind of organization to do that. But if you contact me that way, then or contact me through Facebook Messenger or an email, then I can get the information to them. They really need support. What they need more than anything is their story to get out, so that more and more people will hold people accountable. There's phone numbers in the articles to call. There's both of these families have said, please bring this to the attention of President Trump, the first family. That's easy to do with the hashtag, or hashtag President Trump, or at President Trump, or real Donald Trump is his Twitter. Tweet, get the story out, share your story, your show, and keep on sharing these stories, and that really does help.
And that's why we do this. I just had a discussion with Amelia yesterday about, it's scary sometimes exposing these stories. And that we've been in some hairy circumstances because these are evil people. And when I was talking to Cindy yesterday, whose disabled son was kidnapped in Colorado, same thing's going on, 45 days. She doesn't even know.
Yeah, I saw that. I want to learn more about that one. Ugh, yeah.
I thought you did an article. Okay, I'm going to connect you with this mom, because I'm telling you, this is a bad one. She hasn't seen her son for 45 days.
45 days. That's terrifying.
Information that I can't share right now. That's seriously troubling. And so I'm going to get you in contact with her. But I was talking to her about, look, whenever a family comes to us and they want help, I believe, because this is what I felt the Lord told me. When people ask me, how did you get your kids back? I tell them, well, number one, it was prayer. A lot of the things that we did through prayer. And as we got ideas and direction, we did it. And then things would happen that wouldn't have happened if we would have created it ourselves. We couldn't create it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the other way is to bring it to the light, because no criminal wants their criminal deeds broadcast to the world. And so we need to fight this publicly. We need to get out there and protest. We need to get out there and meet our representatives. I'm going to this conservative summit this month, or in July, and I'm going to talk to people like Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens and Ben Carson, and I'm going to try to give them more and more information on this issue, because we need more people getting involved, but it takes all of us. And
Right.
We really hope that you'll share Terry's articles, support the work that she's doing. If the Lord puts it on your heart to support these families, get a hold of Terry and she'll tell you what their needs are and how you can support them. And we just ask you to support us right now with prayer and to share these videos. Utilize them as a tool to give to your senators, to give to your representatives, because there's things we can do on every single level, state level, local level, national level, but it's going to take all of us. And so, Terry, we really say what, Amelia? Oh, you want to come on? Come on over here? No? Huh? She said no. She's not coming on the camera. But, well, Terry, it's wonderful to talk to you again. Do you have any closing thoughts for the audience?
Remember that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. Remember who the real enemy is. The enemy is the enemy. Satan prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And even the bad guys, the bad players, the people who have caused so much pain and hurt, they're still not the real enemy. And we need to, Jesus said in Matthew 5 to bless those who curse us and pray for those who despitefully use us. And that's one of the hardest things you can do in prayer, but it's one of the most effective. It is literally one of the most effective, because it opens up keys that it's like it by us choosing to obey the Lord, even in make that sacrifice and difficult, then it allows God to deal with them. It opens up the way for God to really deal with them. And so remember who the real enemy is, and stand up for families every chance you get. Remember that our families, as precious as they are, as much as they mean to us, there's an enemy that wants to destroy that. So we've got to educate, and we've got to pray, and we've got to work together.
And we thank you all for joining us tonight. Terry, thank you for coming on the show. And any more stories in the future, we're going to love to have you on again, because I think sometimes it's good to flesh these out. You get an article, you can't put everything in there. And right. I love having you as a guest, because I know you always have your ducks in a row with these articles, and appreciate the work that you do. So everybody have a good evening, and we'll talk to you again soon, Terry. Thanks for coming.